Good to see you.
Yeah, you too.
How are you enjoying doing your podcast?
I love it, especially since I've been thrown out of work by the strike, so it's what I have left plus the touring. But that, touring is a couple of weekends a month. Podcasting doesn't take that much time either. I don't do it every day like you, but it's nice to have an outlet. It's also nice to be able to talk to people in a non-political way. I mean, my show is for, let's say, people who know things. my HBO show.
Right.
You just can't really enjoy that show or watch it if you're clueless. It's like I'm speaking in Chinese.
Right.
So, and that's okay. That's a lot of the people in this country that would describe. They're not involved in politics or what goes on in the world, or, don't ask them what the ACLU is or NATO. These things are just not on their radar. And that certainly also describes a lot of celebrities. Their intelligence is artistic intelligence, generally, I would say. It's a different kind of intelligence. It's not worse or better, it's just different. So to be able to talk to a lot of people on Club Random in a setting where I can just be high as a kite and constantly blowing pot smoke in their face, first of all, it's just a joy. It's a sign of the progress that this country has made. To think that I used to sweat bullets going through every airport in this country because I had this much little pot that I was hiding under my balls.
Right.
That's really where I hid it.
Yeah.
So that if the dog sniffed it, that they'd be embarrassed, I hoped, to look there. And now I can freely smoke pot in a nationally aired program is kind of amazing. So I'm enjoying the fuck out of it.
That's beautiful. Yeah, it's also nice to have like a pretty completely open format so conversations can really air out.
Right.
When you don't have to worry about running out of time. And
right.
You also can kind of let them breathe a little, because sometimes you really want to let someone talk for a long time before you try to interject and pick apart their argument. You really I want to know what you're really thinking. I don't want to be confused.
Again, that's kind of what you pioneered.
Yeah.
And we're grateful for it. And I do like that. I also find it's interesting. The setting makes a big difference as to what arouses the furies on the left. If I said so many of the things that I've said on Club Random, on a podcast, on Real Time, on HBO, they would have had my head.
Yeah.
But somehow, when I say it in the setting of the podcast, in my own home, blowing the pot smoke, somehow it's okay. And I find that very interesting.
I think they look at you like a guy who they're worried about because you don't toe the line.
They should be, exactly.
You're like a 90s liberal. You're like liberals back when they were more reasonable, before they became leftists. And now every liberal kind of has to be a leftist. It's not if you want to be on the team, you got to subscribe to the most fringe ideas that the team is promoting. And I get in trouble with that too. It's such a, there's so many, like Joe List has talked about that recently, the comic Joe List, very funny guy. And he was talking about I'm a 90s liberal. He goes, what? I didn't change. It's like everybody else kind of changed. It got real weird, like what you're allowed to disagree with and not to disagree with. And, it's strange.
I'm always trying to make the case that liberal is a different animal than woke.
Yeah.
Because it is. And you can be woke with all the nonsense that now implies, but don't say that somehow it's an extension of liberalism.
Right.
Because it's most often actually an undoing of liberalism.
So
you can have your points of view and your positions on these things, but don't try to piggyback on what I've always believed. I have always believed, as liberals do, for example, in a colorblind society, that the goal is to not see race at all anywhere for any reason.
Yes.
That's what liberals always believed all the way through. Obama, going back, Kennedy, everybody, Martin Luther King. That's not what the woke believe. They believe race is first and foremost the thing you should always see everywhere, which I find interesting because that used to be the position of the Ku Klux Klan, that we see race first and foremost everywhere.
Yeah.
So, again, you can have that position, but don't say that's a liberal position. You're doing something very different.
I think the idea behind it, I think I understand their idea. The idea is that the society is imbalanced. And so in order to address that imbalance, you're going to prop up as many minorities as possible, make as many opportunities for minorities as possible, and get it to a position where there are, like, white people are a minority. And so that's not a concern anymore. And that through that, somehow or another, you'll achieve equality. I think the way to achieve equality is your way. I think the colorblind way is the way to really, truly achieve equality and to truly judge people just on their merits. But also recognize that if we don't address the problems in this country as far as like how disenfranchised some people are and how horrible some communities are that people grow up in and people find themselves stuck in with no recourse, no way out, no role models, no nothing, no financial opportunities. That's what our real problem is in this country, more than it is race. It's extreme poverty and extreme crime, and that these things don't get addressed over and over and over again. And in fact, a lot of the policies that you see coming from places like San Francisco and Portland, and they just exacerbate it. You're just seeing stores close because, like, okay, you can't just steal. You can't just have everybody just walk into Walmart and steal. I was watching a video where they were showing a Walgreens, and they had everything chained up. Chained.
Oh, yeah.
Chains.
Even minor little things.
Yeah, little things.
Like frozen food dinners.
Yeah, they had the frozen food section chained off.
No, again, that's not... Liberalism was never... shoplifting is progressive.
Right. Yeah.
And we weren't interested in legalizing shoplifting, or as I guess we should call it justice shopping. But, you know, in Minnesota, for example, I think it was Minneapolis, after the George Floyd murder and the riots, I think there was a movement to disband a lot of the police, and they did. I think a lot of the police were let go, or somehow the police force was a lesser force than it was. And what happened was, of course, crime went up in certain areas, and a lot of the officers who had been fired or let go or quit or for whatever reason they weren't on the force anymore, they were hired as private security. By who? The rich people who could afford to do it. So their neighborhood stayed safe. So that wasn't exactly, I thought, a victory for liberalism.
No, it's the opposite.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate. Austin defunded the police and then refunded it. And refunded it by far more than they defunded it. Because they just course corrected. They went, okay, this is not working. We have to do something to fix it, which makes me very happy. Because I was really shocked that they wanted to do that. Because there's a lot of crime. And where my club is on 6th Street, that's a wild place. 6th Street gets wild. And there's a lot of crime there. And there's a good police presence there. And we have a lot of police at the club. We hire off-duty cops to work the club. And a lot of security. We want to make it as safe as possible. But the streets in the city, like, you know, from pandemic on, it's not good. You know, it's sketchy. And I'm glad they recognized it and did something.
Well,
because so many places just aren't course correcting.
Chicago.
Yeah.
I mean, not just the places where, I mean, murders have been happening way out of control in Chicago among the African American community for far too long and not really reported in the way that they should be. It's amazing how black lives don't seem to matter when they're taken by black lives.
Right.
But I mean, now Chicago, my friends who live there say it's not safe anywhere.
Yeah, it's very sketchy, very sketchy.
And that's Chicago.
Yeah, Chicago used to be great. It used to be easy. It used to be a great city. I mean, it always had problems in some areas, but I mean, even those areas. I had a conversation once with a driver who was a former cop, and what he told me is that they arrested all the key drug players, and then there was a power struggle, and things got way worse. He's like, their idea was like, go in, arrest the big kingpins, and then we'll clean up the city. It didn't work at all. The opposite had an effect. It was the opposite effect. There was way more crime. He said just got way more violent.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of the murders that happen are over nonsense. You know, somebody
Sure.
dissed you on social media or made fun of your sneakers or some shit. I mean, some of it is drug turf and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I think some of it is just bullshit. And I don't understand why there isn't a more concerted effort to shine a spotlight on that. And where are the leaders of the community? The people who would have such cachet among those young African American men, because that's who's killing each other.
Yeah.
Young African American men, to say, cut it out. What the fuck are you doing, killing each other? If there was a concerted effort by people in the music industry, people in sports, who they look up to, wouldn't that have an effect?
I don't know. You know, at this point,
Worth a
in time,
try?
I don't know. Worth a try, sure. Worth something. I mean, something needs to be done. I'm not the guy to figure out what needs to be done, but something needs to be done. It should have been done a long time ago. I don't know what that answer is, but no answer is not the answer. And continuing the same policies that got you in the same problems, and just defunding the police officers and making things far worse, and then not course correcting, that's not the answer either.
Right.
It's nice to talk about politics. It's great. I would hate to be one of those fucking people. To be an actual politician and have to be responsible for all this shit. And also to come in now, you know?
Yeah. I mean, they are the easiest people to target because, of course, they have to kowtow